In the very beginning, when I started school, I was a mechanical engineering major and kind of a drastic shift to an art history major. When I first started, my advisor had told me a little bit about art museum practices, but I really knew nothing about it. I just saw it as a concentration to take whatever. And the more that I took art history classes, the more that I realized I needed some way of applying what I was learning. Again, art museum practices came up, and I think I took it out of a way of finding something to do with art history. So from this class, I've learned a lot of different tools and different ways to apply them, and I think that I've given myself a lot of different opportunities, I suppose. From this exhibition alone, I've learned how to write labels, write a curatorial statement for the show, write text panels, and anything like that that I can really use anywhere else. How do you document the show that you're doing? How do you explain it in the simplest and the broadest terms for an audience while still maintaining the core of the show? And as a result of this exhibition, I think I have more experience doing that.
I can apply what I've learned to a future career in many different ways. I would say the first is working in a group for something like this is something you can always take to any job career anywhere. But this art museum practices is the concentration on my art history degree now that I've taken this course and gone through it. So I think it'll open up doors to other programs at universities for more specific, art museum careers, but I also think it'll help influence how I approach things differently going forward.
I've learned quite a bit from this class. We've done a lot of really interesting pieces throughout, working with labels or just interacting with the museum staff, coming up with this exhibition. And as a direct result of all of that, I find myself really interested in space and gallery studies and gallery design, almost. I've actually got an internship lined up in the summer where I'm going to work for a gallery design company. Not really sure what that entails, but I know that I'll be doing a lot of work with looking at how pieces fit in a space. How do you interact with those pieces? How do you bring an audience into something and make sure that they don't project onto the wall themselves, unless that's the intent?
The interest for me to take this class was that I've always had an interest in museum practices, especially curation. So I thought taking this class would teach me more about that aspect and how one might pursue a career in that, and which it definitely has. But I would say what's been my driving interest is just to see the different types of jobs that exist within a museum that I wasn't necessarily aware of before taking this class.
Probably the two most memorable for me were Helona and Amy Gilman, I believe. Amy actually walked through the museum with us and talked about things, but she also answered questions for us and it told us a lot about her personal history, which is something that I needed at that time. She had started off as an artist and I think switched her major several times before she finally decided that that was what she was doing. And as a direct result of my interactions with her, I was able to feel a little bit more confident in just gallery studies or just gallery design and trying to figure out what happens in a space. She never constricted herself and said that this is the only thing that I'm going to do. Helona has been a really fascinating person. I've interacted with her in the museum and outside the museum, and the entire time she's always been pleasant and friendly and polite, and I think that has inspired me a little bit to understand how people interact and look at that in institutional settings or in an educational setting. How do you ask those questions? How do you behave in such a way that people want to come back and learn more? And also, how do you ask those questions so that people feel satisfied? How do you interact in the most appropriate way? And Helona has been a really interesting and great example of that for me.
My job is, on the one hand, to have a pretty good idea of what the topic is going to be, because what precedes the exhibition is a course where I sort of give an introduction to the topic so that the students, particularly those who don't have a background in this area, have a good idea of where to begin. So in a sense, I knew generally what the shape of the exhibition would be, but in terms of the objects and in terms of how those objects are organized and how they're discussed, that was up to the students. That's their job. Time management is important in exhibitions like this because there is an institution behind, waiting for the exhibition, and that institution has a set of deadlines that it needs to meet in order to get things up on time, and this is never the only show that they're doing. Right? So from that standpoint, time management is critical, but it's also important from the beginning to realize that there are always going to be glitches. There are always going to be delays here and there. So if one meets a deadline within a sort of agreed margin, that is generally established at an organizational meeting at the beginning of the semester, then you're okay, and we're within those deadlines. So generally, yes, we're doing pretty well in terms of time management. It's my favorite part in general of working with students, and that is seeing them realize the agency that they actually had all along. Seeing them realize what they can do, what they're capable of doing, and seeing concrete results, watching them see concrete results, right? And seeing them take ownership of the process, and it really becomes it's their show. That's something that is very satisfactory for them, and it's heartening for me to see that.